All right, so lofts. I'll start it, just like with sweeps, I'll start a new part and we'll just kind of talk about it. So here's an instance where I will want a plane above another one to just have two parallel faces to loft something to. Another way to create a plane is to hold control and drag on an existing plane. It's like a quick way to create one. And so now I have my top plane and my plane one. So on my top plane, I can create a square very loosely. And on my plane one, I can create another square. And now I have two shapes. And now in my feature command, if I click on loft, it's asking me for what the profiles are. So again, a loft, it's kind of blending, it's kind of translating one profile to another. So if I were to extrude just one of these shapes, it would be a long rectangle. But now if I click on this sketch and I click on this sketch, it gives us a translation from one to the other. It's twisting because I don't know what the word for this is. This kind of like guide line is going from one corner to an opposite corner. You can always click on this and drag it over and get it to be, you know, the direction you want, or maybe if you're feeling crazy. Okay, SolidWorks doesn't like that. You can get this to go through. Some options, okay? Well, okay, let's talk about loft properties first, because I think I should have started with that with sweeps. Lofts generally like to go from even-sided edges to even-sided edges. So in this instance, we have 4 sides on the bottom, we have 4 sides on top. That's good, a loft likes that. If you go from 4 edges to 5 edges, it can do it, it's just a bit weird. Let's see what that looks like. It just kind of has to figure it out. It kind of makes stuff up. Yes, you can also do that. It doesn't like it, but it'll do it. We can look at that in a bit. Going from 4 sides to a circle. So another thing you can do is you can select both. You'll notice here, like it just kind of makes this edge just kind of like appear from nowhere. Right? If I change the setting to hide lines, you can see that that seam just kind of appears from the middle of the line. So best practices for properties for lofts is to go from even-sided edges to even-sided edges is one property. Another property is similar to sweeps. So like a loft likes to go parallel because it's just more simple, but of course I could loft, if I, let's see if I can edit this plane to be also at an angle. Here, let's do this. Here's another way to create a plane. This is the, for what it's worth, I know we're a bit on a tangent here. This is the way I like to create planes. I like to draw a line and say insert reference geometry plane and click on this line and this dot. And by giving that, it gives me a plane perpendicular to the line. It's the quickest way to give properties to define a plane. And now if I make a sketch on this, you can also have a loft go from like one angled face to another angled face. So back on the top face now. I can select both of these and have these loft together. You'll notice that it just kind of goes straight to it. So again, depending on how close these get to each other, same with sweeps, as we learned before, if it like intersects with itself, it's not going to be happy. So a loft likes space. Ideally, it likes to go parallel. That's you're going to have the most success that way. It can go at an angle, but in general, the more space you have between the loft, there's more room for that shape transition to happen. So there's other properties in here. A simple one is start and end constraints. When you are lofting from a sketch, you can say normal to profile. What that normal is another way to say perpendicular. So you'll notice now the loft starts by going straight up as opposed to going at a straight angle. Same here, I can have it end normal to profile, and this will start it out. It gives me a value to type in, so I can type in 2. I'll be honest, I do not know what this it's not like it's 2 inches or anything. I don't know what that value applies to. In my head, I've always thought of it as like 100% applied or 200% applied. But you'll notice the more that I type it in, like you should see the 2 now, it kind of pushes this loft up higher. This is kind of like the quick and dirty way to make a loft. Better ways to use a loft is to use guide curves. Here is actually an instance where I didn't intend to introduce this right now, but just for the sake of showing you, this is an instance where it would make sense to use a 3D sketch. I'll sometimes draw a line. Sorry, this is kind of adding new stuff. The line in a 3D sketch, it's a little bit more complicated. So here, I can tell the line to be along Y, rather, not along Z, sorry. This tells the line to be vertical. And this is another instance where you might use a spline. You can ignore, I did not intend to introduce this stuff. I just want to show you that you can use guide curves to help you with your sketch. That's the main goal here. But these are the ways that I use a 3D sketch and a spline. The reason that I'm using a spline in this instance is I want an even curve that doesn't only go straight up, but also goes a little bit to the left. So it's like, this is a compound curve. That's when I personally use a spline. That was a small rabbit hole to show you that if I want to loft these 2 now, you can click on a guide curve, and that's a better way to loft than relying on start and end constraints. Guide curves ideally happen from each corner. Again, so if we're thinking of best practices for lofts, we want to give the loft space. You want it to go from an even number of edges to an even number of edges, or sorry, not even, equal. An equal number of edges to an equal number of edges. And you want to use guide curves as opposed to start and end constraints when you can. But be aware that start and end constraints are there and they're useful. And in fact, sometimes you do both. You do both. You'll notice that this guide curve is normal to the sketch face, so I can also set this normal to profile. In this instance, something very funny happened. I'm not sure what. I think it's because that was dragged over. I'll be honest, I don't know why it did this. This is really weird. The profile should be here. Okay, so those are the properties of a loft. Again, it's one shape to another. You want to give it space. You want to have equal edges, and you want to have guide curves when it makes sense. That's the gist of it. It's also sufficient to say, and the tutorial shows this, that you can loft from sketch to sketch, or you can loft from face to sketch. But again, hope the tutorial should show this. Okay, so this tutorial, I'm giving you all a starting position just to, I was fully anticipating that we were going to run over on sweeps. So just in case, I had this file as a backup, which you can download to start with. If we just quickly look at this, our master sketch is on the origin. It's a circle, which we know how to make. It's a new command, which is the ellipse tool. It's right here. When you click on the ellipse tool, you start in the center. Unlike the circle, when you click on the second position, it now lets you set the minor or major axis to what you would like. It is helpful to have one line in here for an ellipse to at least lock it in vertically, because otherwise you can spin this. So that's why this middle construction line exists. This is the master sketch of the file. These are both converted entities to extrude the base of the knob and then the height of the knob, not merged. And then we use surface cuts to work in a quarter. This is a way to work efficiently, so you only have to work on one portion as opposed to everything. It would be possible in this instance here to loft from this face to this face, and you get a pretty clean loft. But again, thinking of the properties of a loft, by doing this, not only do we now have 2 edges that can help define it, but now we also have corners where we can build sketches off of to make our guide curves. So that's where the tutorial picks up from this point. It asks you to, starting with one of the 2 planes, it doesn't matter which, I think it actually says right plane, to start with a sketch. You're going to make a line on this top corner at a slight angle. You're then going to create an arc from this corner to this corner. This angle is to control the arc. So you're going to make both of these tangent to each other. You're then going to define this top line to have an 85-degree relationship here. This is all for the purpose of just kicking this arc out a little bit so that it doesn't, if it's perfectly vertical, sometimes you get like a 0 thickness thing happening. Like if this arc aligns perfectly with this line, sometimes you get a 0 thickness in here, which SolidWorks doesn't like. Anytime you have something in SolidWorks that like blends perfectly and travels any distance, that's what a 0 thickness means. It's like, it's paper thin or even less than that. So it has you create that sketch and exit out. It has you do the same then on the front plane. So once again, I'm hitting Alt-N to like rotate this around. So here I'm going to create this line. In terms of orders of operation, I'm going to now set this line first to be 85. And now I'm going to create this arc, select both to make them tangent to each other, and make this be for construction. So now I have, if I turn my sketches on, I have 2 guidelines. I can exit sketch worlds. And now when I create my loft, which again this asks you to do, you can click on this. I'm going to click on this half quarter profile and then this quarter circle profile and this quarter ellipse profile. And now of course like the loft guide, it's doing this weird thing. But what we're going to do now is click on guide curves and click on this arc and then this arc. And now this gives us a smoother profile. It has you end this section of the tutorial by mirroring this quarter knot. You also notice, look what happened with the guide curves. It bowed out a little bit. It doesn't matter because this is the center of our object. It will blend. If you really don't want that to happen, you can also select an edge as a guide curve. So in this instance, I'm selecting this edge, and that will keep it tight. But the tutorial doesn't necessarily have you do that. So you can go into the mirror command. Make sure you're in the feature mirror. Here it's asking you what face plane you want to mirror it about. If you have this bowing, you don't want to select that face. You want to select the right plane. Once again, it has you select bodies to mirror, not features to mirror. These are very key things to be aware of. So if you're not paying attention or you're just like flying through this, you're going to see this blue. You're going to click on the knob. You might get errors. So you want to expand the bodies to mirror and select on this. You want to merge results, click check. Same thing on the front plane. A quicker way to do this mirror would be to select the plane first. Click on the mirror, then it's already loaded in there. Now it's on bodies to mirror, click this and click check. This is the first step of the tutorial. If I hide these lines, you'll notice something. There's like a seam in here. Can everyone see that? That's not ideal, okay? That is because this is not tangent. This face and this face are not tangent to each other. So one way to fix this, well, there's multiple ways, but you can select these. I was getting an error here, and I'll be perfectly honest with you. I don't know why there's an error. This should be able to be normal to profile. I'm assuming the error is because the profile is a single line and not a closed profile. So don't worry about this seam for now. Just be aware that it exists. And when you loft, especially in quarters, try and watch for that seam. Try to avoid it. It's not good. It's not ideal. So the tutorial at this stage asks you to walk back and start a different loft process. And again, this is to show you that whenever you do a loft, there's different ways to think about it. So if we look at this first way we did it, we lofted from a face to a face, and we went from bottom to top. What the tutorial asks you to do, I believe, is to go ahead and delete these. I think save a copy and then delete them. And then at this instance, it asks you to edit this extrusion and click on merge result. So now we no longer have this profile. Before we didn't merge it because we wanted that profile to loft. It now wants you to go in and edit these sketches. And I think based on time, I'm going to have you all skip to this step. So that first part just now that I talked through, it was to show you that you can loft from a face to a face. It was also to show you that sometimes you get seams in your lofts if you're not careful. So your tutorial, when you have this starting point, you're going to create these 2 sketches. I'll let you know what number you can skip to, again, for the sake of time. But once you create this arc at this 85-degree angle, you can create a straight line here on the top, a straight horizontal line here on the bottom. I guess all lines are straight. Horizontal is the word I meant. And then you can have a vertical line here. Basically, we're creating a closed profile that looks like that, all right? You're going to do the exact same thing on this sketch on the other plane. So again, for you, you won't have this arc yet. You have to create a new sketch on the front plane. L for line. I'm going to drag this horizontally and then drag it back and make it coincident to this edge or that corner. Same thing here, horizontal line. I can drag it back and make it coincident to that edge. Now I can make a new line up to here and click on that. So now I have two closed profiles. This is yet again another way to make a loft. So if you recall in that first tutorial, that first thing I showed you where I had two boxes, these essentially we have two boxes. They just have one of their edges are swooped out as an arc. So now when you go to make the loft, when you choose the profiles, you can choose this sketch and you can choose this sketch. And you'll notice that it just goes, it gives us a straight shot. You'll also notice that the loft is basically lofting about a corner. That's okay, it can do that. Sometimes it gives you errors, but it's pretty robust. It's a safe bet for a Jenga tower that won't fall. What is key though is here in this instance, we're using, for guide curves, we're using the edges we created before. And now this is giving us a similar end result with just a different method. So that's, I wanted to show you that when you think of a loft, you don't only need to think of it, you can think of it as like from top to bottom, but you can also think of it from left to right if you're building in quarters. And sometimes one will give you a better result than the other. In this instance, this will give you a better result. And here's the reason why. Before we had that seam, now when I go to start and end constraints for this, I can say normal to profile and normal to profile. So now we are building in a tangency in our quarter that is having the sketch start tangent from its face. When I click on this checkbox, when I now mirror this, so if I select the right plane, click on mirror, make sure you're on bodies, not features, and click on this, and click check. Same thing, so front plane, click on mirror, make sure you're on bodies, click on this, click check. Now without our edges, you can see there's no seam in there. And that was done because, that was solved because in the loft, we lofted from one profile to another, and we were able to build in the tangency using this start and end constraint command. Whereas the first time we had our loft going from this face to this face, and we were not able to build in a tangency from left to right. I guess just to complete the tutorial, and then I'll open it to questions, it asks you to then, and this is important for the homework and for class on Monday, which I'll talk about in a minute, it asks you to make a sketch on the bottom that's 0.2. I am so curious what that machine is that's shaking the whole class here. It asks you to basically build a 0.25, a quarter-inch long sprue. This is for, we are eventually going to take the handle and the knob and put it onto a toaster oven. So that's why we're building these. Eventually you will design your own handles and knobs. That's what Project 2 is. Adding the sprue on here is going to give you a point to which to add it to the toaster oven. It then asks you to put in some fillets on here. You can fill it on a face if you like. I believe it then also asks you to add an indicator for the knob, just so that you know which way it's pointing. And this, once you hit all these steps, the construction of the knob is done. And best practice, again, always put the fillets at the bottom. Fillets are not as robust. They tend to fail. So, and it prevents you from having the temptation to use a fillet as a part of your Jenga tower. You don't want anything pointing to a fillet if you can avoid it. So this is the end result that we're working towards. Okay, at this stage, any questions on any of this? Yeah, Max.
Can you loft 3 shapes?
Yes, you can loft 3 shapes. So if I go back to this part, The first time I learned lofts, we had to build a toothbrush. And the way that I built it was with just a bunch of planes and yeah, sections and just kept lofting. All at once is quicker. Sections is typically more robust. It's very rare that I'm lofting from multiple profiles. You get a smoother, cleaner transition when you don't do that. So let's see here if I can answer multiple questions that you had asked in one example. Okay, don't do as I'm doing. Use the origin. So, yeah. So I could have a circle on this face. I could have a square on this face, or on this plane rather, and then I could have a rectangle on this plane. And let's see, it should work. We should be able to go from this to this to this. Without guide curves, these things become, these like anchor things become important, but I really hate them. They're so finicky. Like sometimes it doesn't do what you want to do. Again, that's like kind of the dirty way to do a loft. But there, that shows you can loft multiple, and from a circle to a square. Any other questions on this? Cool. All right. Yeah, so again, I'll give you a half hour to do this tutorial. So I encourage everyone to go into Box, Project 2, Lofts and Sweeps, download this. It will give you a starting point that looks like this here. And what I encourage you to do is to start the tutorial at step 6. And then when you get to, actually, wait, let's think about this. Do step 6 and 7, and then jump to step 17. So start with 6 and 7, and then jump to 17, just because we're running out of class time. Just understand what the steps that we're skipping is explaining how to loft from 2 profiles and showing you like that you can loft top to bottom or left to right, and just remember that when you're creating a loft that you have multiple options. If you start with 6 and 7 and then skip to step 17, you're going to go left to right, and that will give you a better result because you won't have that seam. If you feel like you're comfortable and like the handle went quick for you, then I would encourage you to go to not skip to step 17 and to go through the motions and try that other option as well. If you're comfortable, yes, do both. If you're uncomfortable or slow, feel free to skip to step 17.